My name is Betty Cadwell and I am 58 years old. My best friend bragged, I stole your promotion and your men. I smiled and said, thank you for taking out the trash for me. I walked into the office kitchen, my joints aching from 40 years of hard work. I just wanted a cup of tea, but the air felt frozen. My best friend of 30 years, Tara, was standing there with a smug look on her face. She was holding a glass of champagne, and my boyfriend, Jason, had his arm around her waist. They weren't even trying to hide it. Tara looked at me, her eyes shining with a mean light. Oh, Betty, don't look so shocked, she purred, her voice sounding like a cat with a bird. I stole your promotion and I stole your mun. It was actually quite easy. The rest of the staff stared at us, waiting for me to scream or cry. Instead, I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. I looked at the mun I thought I loved and the woman I trusted most. I smiled slowly and said, then I guess you're keeping the garbage. The room stayed silent as I walked past them toward the director's office. My heart was thumping like a drum, but my face was like stone. Mr. Henderson didn't even look up from his desk when I walked in. He told me plainly that the senior vice president position was going to Tara. He said she had fresher ideas and more energy. It didn't matter that I had mentored her for a decade. It didn't matter that I had written the very strategy she used to impress them. After the meeting, I went home to the house I shared with Jason. The silence there felt heavy and wrong. While I was packing my things, I saw something shiny on the nightstand. It was a gold hoop earring. It wasn't mine. It belonged to Tara. Seeing it there, in my sanctuary, felt like a physical blow to my stomach. Before I continue this story of how I reclaimed my life, please subscribe if you believe in justice. When Jason finally came home, he looked at my suitcase and sighed. He didn't even look guilty. He told me it was nothing and that he and Tara just had a connection that I couldn't understand anymore. He said I was getting too focused on retirement and old-fashioned ways of living. He spoke to me like I was a broken tool that he didn't need in his shed anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just watched him lie to my face. Later that night, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from Tara. It showed a picture of her and Jason clinking glasses at our favorite restaurant. The caption read, "It's definitely something, Betty. Maybe it's time to admit you're finished." I felt a spark of heat in my chest that hadn't been there in years. I deleted his contact, blocked her number, and sat down with a yellow legal pad. The next Monday was the big staff meeting. I sat at the back of the room, feeling like a ghost in my own company. Tara stood at the front, wearing a bright red suit that screamed for attention. She started her presentation, and my blood turned to ice. She was using my private files. Every word coming out of her mouth was a project I had worked on for 6 months while she was out networking. She took all the credit, smiling at the board members as they clapped for her brilliance. Jason sat right next to her, looking at her like she was a queen. I clutched my pen so hard I thought it would snap in my hand. I felt the hot sting of tears, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I looked up and realized the senior VP, Daniel, was watching me very closely. After the meeting ended, the room emptied quickly. Everyone was rushing to congratulate Tara on her big win. I stayed behind to gather my notes, feeling the weight of my age and the betrayal. Just as I reached the door, Daniel stepped in my way. He was a quiet man who usually kept to himself, but his eyes were sharp. "I know she didn't do that work, Betty," he said softly. I stopped in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. He told me he had seen my original drafts in the shared drive weeks ago before they were mysteriously deleted. He looked at me with a respect I thought I had lost. "The board thinks she's the future, but I know who the engine is," he continued. He leaned in closer and lowered his voice. "I want to see what you can really do when you aren't holding someone else up. I'll give you something unforgettable." I spent the next few days in a daze of hard work. Daniel had given me a small, private office on the top floor, far away from the noise of Tara's department. I stayed late every night, fueled by black coffee and a burning need to prove I wasn't just old furniture. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, the door creaked open. It was Daniel. He wasn't carrying a laptop or a file, he just had 2 cups of coffee. He sat on the edge of my desk, and for the first time in years, I felt like a woman instead of just a worker. We talked about the company, our lives, and the things we had lost. When I reached for my sugar, our fingers brushed against each other. The air in the room suddenly felt very thick. He didn't pull his hand away. Instead, he looked at me with a warmth that made my heart flutter like a teenager's. The day for my private presentation to Daniel arrived. I had spent 48 hours straight refining every single detail of a new expansion plan. This wasn't just a project, it was my soul on paper. I wore my best navy blazer and stood tall. As I spoke, I saw Daniel's eyes gleaming with genuine respect. He didn't interrupt me once. He listened to my ideas on how to save the company millions by cutting out the middleman, the very middleman Tara was currently trying to hire. When I finished, he stood up and walked over to me. He told me it was the most brilliant thing he had seen in 20 years. Behind the glass wall of the conference room, I saw Tara walking by. She stopped and glared at us, her face turning a nasty shade of purple. She knew she was losing control of the story, and I felt a tiny bit of my power returning. The tension in the office was getting higher every day. Tara knew Daniel was spending time with me, and she didn't like it one bit. One evening, I saw her corner him near the elevators. She was leaning in close, playing with her hair and laughing at things that weren't funny. She was trying to use the same charms she used to steal Jason, thinking every man was a prize to be won with a smile. I watched from the glass hallway, my heart squeezing. I wondered if Daniel would fall for it like the others had. But then, something amazing happened. Daniel checked his watch, stepped back, and left Tara standing there in the middle of her sentence. He walked straight toward me and asked if he could walk me to my car. The look on Tara's face was worth more than a year's salary. It was the first time she had been ignored. Even though I was doing well at work, the nights were still hard. I made the mistake of checking social media before bed. Jason had posted a photo of him and Tara at a beach house. They were both tan and smiling. The caption said, "Power couple goals. Finally found my equal." My phone started buzzing with messages from old friends. Some were trying to be nice, but most of them were just full of pity. They thought I was a discarded woman with nowhere to go. I felt a sob rise in my throat, but I forced myself to swallow it. I wasn't going to be a victim. I sat up, opened my laptop, and uploaded my new corporate profile. I changed my title to Independent Consultant. I wanted the world to know that I didn't belong to Jason or that company anymore. I belonged to myself. The next morning, the office was buzzing with a new flavor of poison. Tara had been busy. She was telling anyone who would listen that I hadn't been promoted because I was actually being phased out for poor performance. She whispered to the interns that I was being fired and that Daniel was only helping me out of pity for an old lady. She thought the rumors would break me, so I just let them spread. I didn't defend myself. I just kept my head down and worked. I knew that the louder she lied, the harder the truth would hit when it finally came out. Just before lunch, Daniel called my private line. His voice was serious and low. "Betty, I need you to come to my office right now," he said. "I have a proposal that will change everything for you. If you want to see how I turned the tables, subscribe now." I walked into Daniel's office, my heart racing against my ribs. He didn't look like a boss. He looked like an ally. He turned his monitor around to show me a secret project the executive board had been planning for months. It was a complete overhaul of the regional branch, a position that sat much higher than the one Tara had stolen. "The board is tired of the flashy games," Daniel said, his voice firm. "They want someone with deep roots and a steady hand. They want you to lead this, Betty." I looked at the salary and the benefits, and my breath hitched. It was double what I had ever made. He told me he wanted me to replace Tara's entire oversight committee. I would be her boss in everything but name until the official announcement. I felt a surge of cold, sharp joy. "I'll do it," I whispered. "I'll take it." I started my new role the very next day, but we kept it quiet. I worked from home or from Daniel's private suite, using a code name for all my digital files. To the rest of the office, it looked like I was just drifting away, exactly like Tara wanted them to believe. Because I was now in charge of corporate auditing, every single report from Tara's team had to pass through my computer first. She had no idea. She thought she was sending her data to a faceless board member in another city. Every afternoon, I sat in my quiet living room, sipping tea and watching Tara's sloppy mistakes pop up on my screen. She was cutting corners and inflating her numbers to look like a superstar. I saved every single version of her lies, tucking them away in a folder labeled evidence. The trap was being set, and she was walking right into it. While Tara was failing at work, her personal life with Jason was starting to show some ugly cracks. One evening, I was at a grocery store across town when I saw them in the parking lot. They weren't the power couple from the photos. Jason was red-faced, shouting about how she was always on her phone, and Tara was screaming back, telling him he was boring and needy. I stood behind a pillar, watching the man I had loved for 5 years turn into a stranger. It was clear that without my steady support, Jason was falling apart. He looked messy and exhausted. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. It was a text from Jason. "I made a mistake, Betty. I didn't realize how much you did for me. Can we talk?" I felt a wave of disgust. He wasn't sorry he hurt me, he was just sorry his life was harder now. I decided to meet Jason, but not because I wanted him back. I needed him to know exactly where he stood so I could clear my mind for the final move. We met at our old favorite cafe, the one with the chipped tables and the smell of cinnamon. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He reached across the table to grab my hand, his voice shaking. "Tara is a nightmare, Betty. She's selfish and she's lying to the company. Please, just come home." I looked at his hand and then at his face. I didn't feel sadness, and I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing at all. I stood up, left my coffee untouched, and looked him in the eye. "I don't revisit trash, Jason. You chose her, so you can keep her." I walked out while he was still talking, leaving him alone with the bill and his regrets. The time for the secret project's unveiling finally arrived. The executive board held a closed-door meeting to review the new innovation strategy one had built in the shadows. Daniel stood by my side as I presented the data. When the board members saw how I had discovered a way to save the company millions by fixing the errors Tara had ignored, they were floored. The CEO himself stood up and shook my hand. He ordered an immediate rollout of my plan across all departments. This meant that every single manager, including Tara, would now have to report their productivity metrics directly to my new office. The board was furious when they realized how much money had been wasted under the new energy Tara had promised. Before the meeting ended, they signed the order to freeze her department's budget. The storm was finally breaking. The company held a grand celebration at a rooftop lounge to mark the end of the quarter. Tara arrived late, draped in expensive silk and clinging to Jason's arm like a trophy. She was loud, laughing and trying to command the room, unaware that the board had already signed her downfall. I walked in wearing a simple, tailored black dress and the pearls my mother gave me. I felt radiant, not because of my clothes, but because of the truth I carried. When Daniel stepped onto the small stage, the room went quiet. He didn't toast the department heads or the flashy marketing. He looked straight at me. "To the future of this company," he announced, raising his glass high. "And to the woman who stayed steady and made this empire possible, Betty." The applause was deafening. Every eye in the room turned to me, and for once, the light was where it belonged. Tara's face turned a ghostly shade of white as the cheers continued. She tried to maintain her plastic smile, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. She realized that everyone knew something she didn't. Jason looked even worse. He was staring at me with a mixture of awe and deep regret. Unable to handle the shift in power, Tara grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit. Jason followed her, his face red with embarrassment. Just as they reached the elevator, they started screaming at each other. Tara blamed him for making her look weak, and Jason yelled that she had ruined his life. They didn't notice a young intern standing nearby, holding a phone. The entire ugly argument was being filmed. It was a spectacular public meltdown, and it was the last thing the office would talk about for weeks. By the next morning, the video of the power couple screaming in the hallway was everywhere. It had gone viral on the company's internal Slack channel and even made it to local business blogs. Tara's reputation as a professional leader cracked into 1,000 pieces. Clients began calling, asking why their account manager was acting like a spoiled child on the internet. I sat in my office, watching the fallout with a heavy heart but a clear mind. HR didn't wait long. They launched an immediate investigation into Tara's conduct and her hiring of Jason for her team, which was a clear violation of company policy. She had been so busy trying to hurt me that she had forgotten to cover her own tracks. The walls were finally closing in on her, and there was no one left to catch her as she fell from her stolen throne. Later that afternoon, Daniel came to my office and closed the door. He looked tired but relieved. He sat down and admitted something I hadn't expected. "I knew from the very first day you were the real leader here, Betty," he said. "I just had to wait for the others to see it too." He reached across the desk, and our hands brushed again. This time, I didn't pull away, and neither did he. It was a deliberate, warm connection that felt like a promise. He squeezed my fingers gently and looked me in the eye. "Don't let her steal another minute of your happiness," he whispered. "You've earned this victory." I realized then that I hadn't just saved my career, I had found someone who actually saw my worth. If you are rooting for the underdog, go ahead and subscribe for more of my journey. The investigation didn't take long. With the evidence I had gathered and the public video, the board had no choice. Tara was officially suspended pending a full legal review of her department's finances. As she was being escorted out of the building, Jason chose that exact moment to dump her publicly in front of the lobby security guards. He told her he never loved her and that he only wanted the promotion she promised. Tara lost her mind. She spotted me standing near the glass doors and lunged toward me, screaming at the top of her lungs. "You ruined me, Betty. You did this." The guards held her back while she sobbed and cursed my name. I didn't say a word. I just watched her go. She thought I had taken her life, but the truth was much simpler. She had finally met the consequences of her own actions. The day after Tara was escorted out, the air in the office felt lighter, as if a thick fog had finally lifted. I was sitting in the break room when the CEO called me directly. He didn't want a meeting, he wanted a commitment. He offered me a massive promotion to move to the corporate head office in Chicago to lead the entire innovation division. It was the highest role a woman had ever held in our company's history. I felt a flutter of nerves, but Daniel encouraged me to take it. He told me that I had outgrown this branch and that I deserved to sit at the table where the big decisions were made. "Take the throne she thought was hers," he said with a proud smile. I looked at the contract and signed my name with a steady hand. I was leaving the ghosts of my past behind for a future I had built myself. On my last night in the city, Daniel took me to a quiet, candlelit dinner at a restaurant overlooking the river. We didn't talk about work or the scandal. We talked about dreams and the things we wanted to see in the world. Over a glass of vintage wine, the laughter felt easy and honest. The intimacy between us grew with every passing hour. Daniel leaned across the table, his eyes dark and focused on mine. "You terrify me in the best way, Betty," he admitted, his voice a low rumble. "I've never met a woman with your strength and grace." I reached out and touched his hand, feeling a spark that made me feel 40 years younger. I whispered, "Good," and leaned in. That night, I realized that betrayal had been the bitter medicine I needed to wake up and start living a life that was truly mine. I moved into a stunning penthouse in Chicago, where the walls were made of glass and the city lights looked like diamonds scattered on velvet. My new life was full of power, high-level meetings, and a team that actually respected my experience. I was no longer the old lady in the corner, I was the chief of innovation. Back home, Tara had become nothing more than a warning story whispered by the water cooler. She had vanished from the professional world, her name ruined by the viral video and the audit. But just as I was starting to feel completely at peace, a mysterious email popped up in my inbox. It came from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "Warning." I opened it to find a single, chilling sentence, "You don't know what she's planning, Betty. She isn't gone yet." My heart went cold. I soon discovered that Tara hadn't disappeared, she had been plotting a comeback. She had managed to talk her way into a consulting role for our biggest rival company, a firm known for their dirty tactics. She was using her knowledge of our internal systems to help them steal our clients. She thought she was being clever, hiding behind a new corporate title and a fake wig. When I saw her name on a competitor's proposal, I didn't panic. I didn't even get angry. I felt a cold, sharp thrill of excitement. She wanted to play a game of shadows, but she forgot that I was the one who taught her how to read the light. I leaned back in my leather chair and smiled at the city below. "Perfect timing, Tara," I whispered to the empty room. "I've been waiting for a reason to finish this properly." The time for mercy was over. I reached out to my contacts in the industry and quietly began leaking the internal documents I had saved months ago. These weren't just mistakes, they were proof of Tara's fraud, her lies to investors, and her illegal manipulation of client funds. I made sure the evidence was undeniable and sent it directly to the rival company's board of directors and the local news. I wanted her to feel the floor drop away just like I had. "You started this war, Tara," I thought as I hit the send button. "I'm just the one finishing it." Within hours, the scandal broke across every business headline in the state. If you love seeing a villain finally get what they deserve, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. I watched the news ticker with a steady heart, knowing that the final act had finally begun. The media coverage was a tidal wave that nothing could stop. Every major business channel ran the story of the consultant of deceit. They showed her face right next to the evidence of the fraud she had committed. The rival company didn't even wait for a statement. They fired her within the hour and put out a press release saying they were horrified by her actions. By evening, Tara posted a video of herself crying into a tissue, claiming she was a victim of a hateful smear campaign by a jealous former friend. But the world wasn't buying it. The comment section was a graveyard of her reputation, filled with the word karma over and over again. I watched it from my balcony, the wind blowing through my hair. She had tried to burn my house down, but she had only succeeded in setting her own life on fire. While the news was still fresh, I led my company in a bold move to acquire Tara's entire client base. Because she had manipulated their funds, they were legally allowed to break their contracts with the rival firm. They came flocking back to us, begging for the stability and honesty I represented. Daniel flew to Chicago to celebrate the victory with me. When he walked into my office, he didn't say a word. He just took me in his arms and kissed me with a passion that felt like a reward for every battle I had fought. "You've done it, Betty," he whispered against my skin. "You've built an empire on the ashes of her lies." We spent the night looking out at the skyline, a pair of victors who had played the long game and won. It was a victory of fire and grace. Later that night, as we lay in the soft glow of the city lights, Daniel ran a hand over my shoulder. He whispered that I didn't need to chase revenge anymore, that I had already won everything a person could want. I looked at the reflection of the powerful woman in the glass window and smirked. "Revenge didn't just give me justice, Daniel," I told him. "Revenge built this empire." I realized then that I wasn't the same soft woman who had walked into that office kitchen months ago. Just then, my laptop chimed. A new email from Tara appeared. It was filled with rage and desperation, telling me that I would regret the day I ever met her. She was losing her mind as she lost her world. I didn't even feel the need to reply. Some people are their own worst punishment, and Tara was finally meeting hers. A week later, Tara did the unthinkable. She filed a massive lawsuit against me for defamation, claiming I had ruined her life with lies. She thought she could scare me into a settlement, but she had forgotten who I was. I showed up in court wearing a stunning white suit, looking like the embodiment of truth. I sat in the front row, calm and composed, while Tara's lawyer ranted about her stolen career. When it was my turn, my lawyer didn't argue. He simply played a series of leaked audio messages and texts from Tara's own phone. In them, she clearly plotted my firing and laughed about how she was going to drain the old lady dry. The courtroom went deathly silent. Tara looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. The judge didn't even need a recess to see who the real liar was. The judge dismissed the case immediately and ordered Tara to pay all my legal fees. But I wasn't done. Because of her failed lawsuit, her financial situation was a disaster. Her luxury condo was being foreclosed on, and she had no way to pay her debts. I sent my lawyer to her with a single offer. I would buy her condo from the bank, but I would only pay half of its market value. It was a humiliating offer, but she had no other choice. She had to sign the papers and move out within 48 hours. I now owned the very roof over her head. I walked through the empty rooms she had once bragged about, feeling the cold weight of justice. She had tried to take my home and my heart, so I took her pride and her palace. The trash was finally outside. With the condo keys in my hand, I made my next move. I reached out to Tara's former assistant, Sarah, a hardworking girl whom Tara had treated like a servant for years. Sarah had been left unemployed and struggling after the scandal broke. I invited her to my office and offered her a position as my personal executive liaison. "I'll give you double the pay you had before," I told her. "And in this office, there is a strict rule, no betrayal and total respect." Sarah's eyes filled with tears of relief as she shook my hand. As a show of loyalty, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "Tara left this in her desk the day she was suspended," Sarah whispered. It was Tara's private diary. It wasn't full of memories, it was a manual of every lie she had ever told to get ahead. I spent the night reading through that diary, and the contents were even darker than I imagined. Tara had written down every secret she had gathered on the board members, every time she had sabotaged a coworker's project, and the exact dates she started her affair with Jason. It was a roadmap of a sociopath. She had even written about how she planned to use Jason to get to my retirement fund. I felt a chill run down my spine realizing how close I had come to losing everything. I didn't keep the book to use for blackmail, that would make me just like her. Instead, I sent a digital copy anonymously to the corporate HR archives and the legal board. I wanted her history of deceit to be a permanent record that followed her forever. I was making sure she could never hurt another soul in this industry. A month later, The company held a magnificent corporate gala. It was the most important night of the year, and I was the guest of honor. Daniel and I stood together at the entrance, and before the cameras began to flash, he took my hand. In front of the entire industry, he announced our engagement. The room erupted in cheers. Reporters scrambled to get a quote from the couple that built an empire together. I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in decades. I looked out into the crowd and saw the faces of people who had once pitied me, now looking at me with pure admiration. Somewhere in the back of the room, near the service entrance, I saw a familiar face. Tara was standing there, hiding in the shadows, trembling as she watched the life she tried to steal become mine forever. Tara couldn't help herself. In a fit of drunken desperation, she tried to storm the stage during my acceptance speech. She looked haggard, her hair a mess and her expensive dress stained with wine. She stole my life. Tara screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me while security rushed toward her. That was supposed to be me. Everything she has belongs to me. The music stopped, and the room went silent. I didn't look away, and I didn't look afraid. I simply leaned into the microphone and spoke with a voice that was as steady as a mountain. No, Tara, I said gently. I didn't steal your life. I simply reclaimed mine. You were just a temporary tenant in a house you didn't build. Security escorted her out into the cold night as the guests began to clap. Her reign of terror was officially over. Shortly after the gala, the board of directors met for an emergency session. They didn't just want me to lead the innovation department anymore, they appointed me as the chief innovation officer for the entire global firm. I was now one of the most powerful women in the country. Daniel, ever the gentleman, decided to step back from his executive duties to focus on our new life together, letting me take the lead. You've outgrown even me, Betty, he said with a proud look in his eyes as he helped me move into my new corner office. The world is finally seeing what I saw that first day in the kitchen. I looked at the nameplate on my desk and realized that the old lady they tried to discard was now the one holding the keys to the future. Subscribe for more stories about finding your power. A few weeks after my promotion, my phone buzzed with a message from an unsaved number. It was Jason. He sent a long, rambling text about how seeing my face on the cover of a business magazine made him realize he had lost the best thing he ever had. He called me incredible and unforgettable. He even had the nerve to ask if we could grab a drink and catch up on old times. I looked at his words and remembered the night I found Tara's earring on the nightstand. I remembered how he had looked at me like I was a piece of broken machinery. I didn't feel a single spark of longing or even a flicker of anger. I felt a cold, clean sense of finality. I didn't type a single word in reply. I simply pressed the button to block him forever. My smile in the mirror said everything. My story began to spread far beyond the walls of the office. A famous journalist from a national magazine came to interview me for a feature on the new face of power. She asked me what my secret was for surviving such a public betrayal and coming out on top. I sat back in my leather chair, looking out at the city I now helped lead. My secret is simple, I told her, my voice calm and sure. Never chase people who don't see your value. Just replace them with a better version of your own life. That quote went viral within hours, trending on every social media platform. Thousands of women reached out to tell me how my journey had given them the courage to leave toxic situations. I realized that my revenge hadn't just saved me, it had become a light for others who felt discarded. Years passed, and the sting of the past became nothing more than a distant memory. One afternoon, while I was visiting my old town for a charity event, I bumped into Tara in a small, dusty cafe. She looked much older than she was, her face lined with bitterness and her clothes looking worn and cheap. She was working behind the counter, pouring coffee for people who didn't even know her name. When she saw me, she froze, her hand shaking so hard the coffee spilled onto the saucer. "You won," she muttered, her voice sounding like dry leaves. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt a tiny bit of pity. I didn't gloat, and I didn't bring up the past. I just smiled gently at her and said, "No, Tara. I didn't win. I evolved." I left a generous tip and walked out. I decided to use my wealth and influence to create a legacy that would outlast any office drama. I funded a series of national scholarships specifically for older women returning to the workforce or starting their own businesses. I wanted to make sure that no woman ever felt too old or too finished to demand respect and chase her dreams. My story became a legend within the company, a tale told to every new hire about the woman who turned a betrayal into an empire. In the lobby of the Chicago headquarters, the board placed a gold plaque with my name on it. Below it, The inscription read, "She turned betrayal into empire." It wasn't just a reminder of what I had done, it was a promise that at this company, integrity would always be the foundation of success. The final scene of my long journey took place in my office on a quiet Friday evening. I stood before the massive glass window, watching the sun set over the city. I thought about that morning in the kitchen when Tara told me she had stolen my money and my promotion. I realized that she had actually done me the biggest favor of my life. She took the trash out so I could finally see the gold underneath. She stole my promotion and my money, I whispered to the quiet room. And in return, I reclaimed my destiny. I picked up my briefcase, feeling the weight of power, poise, and most importantly, peace. I walked out of the office and toward a future with Daniel that was built on truth. The trash took itself out, and I made sure it stayed there. Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe for more. Also turn on your notification bell so you be the first to get our next shocking revenge story.